In this topic, we're going to discuss the movement of water through the leaf. So just a recap of the structure of the leaf, which we've done in a previous lesson, and then how water moves from the xylem in the leaf into the mesophil cells, and then from the mesophil cells into the air spaces, and you need to know the definition of transpiration. We're also going to look at stomata and how guard cells change shape to open and close the stomata. So where you see the words in purple, you need to fill these in your handout. So here you can see the structure of a leaf. At the top, you've got the upper epidermis, and then you've got the palisade mesophil cells just beneath that. Beneath the palisade mesophil cells, you've got the spongy mesophil cells, and this is where you find lots of air spaces between the different cells. So water is going to be absorbed by the roots by a process called osmosis. It then moves up the stem and enters the leaves, where it's going to be lost to the atmosphere as water vapor. Now the mesophil cells have got damp cell walls, so water evaporates from these cell walls into the air spaces, so that the air spaces become saturated with water vapor. The water vapor then diffuses out of the stoma, or stomata plural, into the atmosphere. So let's go through each stage step by step. So water moves from the xylem into the mesophil cells by osmosis because the water potential in the leaf cells, the mesophil cells, is lower. So it goes from the xylem vessels into the mesophil cells by osmosis. It's going from a high water potential to a low water potential. Then it moves from the mesophil cells into the air spaces. Now there's usually more water vapor in the air spaces than there is in the outside air. So water vapor diffuses through the stomata into the air. And the water lost from the spongy mesophil cells is going to be replaced by more water from the xylem. Remember that the stomata are there to allow carbon dioxide into the leaf and oxygen out. So carbon dioxide enters the leaf so that photosynthesis can take place in those cells. Water vapor is going to move out of the stomata. This is because there's a water vapor gradient between the leaf air spaces and the atmosphere. So water vapor is going to diffuse down this gradient. So here's a lovely diagram to illustrate how water moves from the xylem into the mesophil cells by osmosis. Then it evaporates from the cell wall of the mesophil cells into the air to form water vapor. This vapor is going to diffuse out of the stomata of the leaf in a process called transpiration. So what is transpiration? This is the loss of water vapor from the stomata of the leaf. Just to recap, diffusion is the movement of particles from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration down the concentration gradient. Okay, let's have a look at stomata. So what are stomata? Stomata are simply holes in the leaf. So here you can see two stomata. One of them is open and one of them is closed. And they're formed when two special cells called guard cells push apart slightly because they've changed shape. Notice how the guard cells are surrounded by epidermal cells. So here's a beautiful image of the stomata on the surface of a leaf. Notice how you can identify them quite distinctly because they've got the curved shapes. The guard cells have got those, they kind of look like two beans together. And then they're surrounded by jigsaw-shaped cells, which are your epidermal cells. So how do guard cells change shape? Well, they change shape if they lose or gain water. If the cells, so have a look at the left there, become turgid, this is because they've taken in water. They become larger and they bend away from each other. So the stomata open. When the guard cells lose water, on the right there, they become flaccid and then they end up touching each other. So the stoma is closed. Also notice in these guard cells how the inner cell wall is much thicker compared to the outside cell wall. So this allows for the guard cell to bend outwards. So why do plants have stomata? Well, these allow for carbon dioxide to enter the leaf for photosynthesis. Oxygen will be able to diffuse out as well. So water vapor is a natural consequence, or water vapor loss is a natural consequence of the stomata being open, because there's a water vapor diffusion gradient between the air spaces in the leaf and the atmosphere around the leaf. Okay, so in this lesson we looked at the structure of a leaf and then how water moves from the xylem into the mesophyll cells. So remember that it moves by osmosis down its water potential gradient. How does water move from mesophyll cells into the air spaces? It evaporates from the cell walls and then it diffuses out through the stomata. So what is the definition of transpiration? I want you to write that down. We also looked at stomata and how they open, or the stomata is open and closed depending on the guard cell. So if the guard cells are turgid, the stomata are going to be open. If the guard cells are flaccid, the stomata will close. And that concludes our lesson. The end.